Hey everybody, it is time for the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, well, more particularly the legal mess of Erika Jayne, Erika Girardi from the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills from a more legal perspective. I've been really looking forward to getting you guys like a legal commentator to really get into the meat and potatoes of these sorts of issues. So with me today, I've got none other than Stephanie from Wine and Chill. Stephanie, why don't you tell everybody about your background? This is so exciting.
Sounds good. Hi, Grace. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Also, my computer seems to be doing a weird thing. So if I freeze, hopefully it's not on a bad angle. So I run the legal commentary and just general commentary channel, Wine and Chill. And basically, so my background is in entertainment law. And then I've since been working in tech for about like 5-6 years. So the way that my channel did, I did a breakdown of Kanye's contracts when he tweeted out 100 and something pages of contract language. So mine is mostly, I would say, like in tech transactions as well as contracts. So advising artists, advising startups, things of that nature.
Absolutely amazing. And where did you go to school, Stephanie, if you don't mind us asking?
So I graduated school over here in New York. So I live in New York and I moved to New Orleans. But yeah.
So cool. New York and NOLA. Yeah, it's so funny how this stuff works. When Stephanie and I were doing our discussion like backstage before the stream, it was perfect. And as soon as we go live, it starts going wonky. Uh-oh. You know what might have to happen?
It was just fine a second ago. So
it's crazy. Do you mind? Why don't you try exiting and coming back in, okay?
Okay, perfect. Let me try that.
Okay, let's see. Fingers crossed because, okay, this is going to be good, you guys. We've got a lawyer here to help us answer all of the legal questions about Erika Girardi. So if there's a question that you've been wondering about this case this whole time that you haven't been able to ask yet, please make sure to leave it in the comment section because this is going to be juicy. While we wait for Stephanie to come back in, I'm going to give you a little bit of the rundown on what it is that we are going to cover in this episode. So we're going to talk about the subpoenaed footage. Remember, just the other day, Bravo was served with a subpoena for all unaired footage of Erika. Why is that footage being subpoenaed? And what does this mean for Erika and Bravo moving forward? Is she eventually going to become more trouble than she's worth? And second of all, Tom and Erika's La Quinta condo was just sold for $1.2 million. So I'm sure we all want to know now, what happens with all of that money? Who gets a cut of it first out of the victims, et cetera, et cetera. And then we're going to talk about how Tom and Erika were accused of staging a fraudulent divorce in order to get out of paying his victims. And they are hiding assets, allegedly, of course, right? So we're going to talk about what this accusation means. Is it a criminal accusation? When will this, or will this become like a criminal complaint? Is there enough I want to say data almost, but is there enough evidence yet for them to kind of go forward on this notion? And then, of course, $25 million were transferred into Erika Girardi's bank account. And she was the sole owner of EJ Global, but now she's claiming ignorance when it comes to that money and how it got there, what it was spent on, et cetera, et cetera. Can she really claim ignorance now? Or is this going to be just, her getting raked over the coals in the courtroom when they grill her on all of this? And then, of course, listen, Erika has very much been maintaining on this season of the show that she had no idea, not a single idea about Tom withholding money from his clients. But come to find out, all of this information we're starting to get leaked as far back as 2016. So it's not exactly new news here. And then in speaking of that, I think I had a second point there, you guys, but of course I did just lose my train of thought. Sorry about that. But why is Erika? Oh, Stephanie is back. Let's get her in. Stephanie, testing.
Testing. It looks like we're clear now. I was a blur of colors before.
Absolutely perfecto. So, guys, thank you so much for hanging in there. It is so nice to have you all here. And again, please make sure to leave any question that you have for Stephanie in the chat below because we are ready. So, do you want to just get into it, Stephanie?
Yeah, let's get into it. So I
So,
figured, oh, go
uh-huh.
first.
No, you go ahead. What's that?
I was going to say, so Grace and I were talking about this earlier, which this case, since it's been going on since December of 2020, has had so many twists and turns. So there's like a lot to cover. So I figured we'd do like a high level overview of where we are. And then I'll have Grace lead the conversation to like the things that she thinks y'all are interested in.
Perfect. So, from the top, where are we at,
Cool.
Steph?
From the top. So many years ago, which I think it's important to note, like which most people know are familiar with Tom Girardi at this point, but from a legal perspective, Tom Girardi was actually somebody I learned about in law school. The movie that Julie Roberts was in, Erin Brockovich, is based on Tom Girardi. So Tom Girardi used to be a famous plaintiff's attorney when he started and was very much a for the people attorney. And so what happened in the Erin Brockovich case, he won all this money for these working class people. And he was very much like, hey, if you want to do litigation, like Tom Girardi is like this wonderful human being. Fast forward to now, when Tom Girardi has resurfaced back into the limelight, it's a little bit different. Specifically, he was one of the attorneys, his firm, Girardi Keys, on the Lion Air crash. When that happened, the plane went missing, and he was supposed to get a large settlement for all of these people. It was then alleged in 2020 that, hey, not only did you not give the money like you were supposed to, which is the number one cardinal sin as an attorney, you're supposed to have separate bank accounts. If I am your attorney, I can't put your money in my personal bank account. It has to be in an escrow account. Allegedly, he didn't do these things. They then further on, Edelson PC, who sued him, further on stated like, hey, not only did you take this money, you have been giving millions of dollars to Erika. And not only are you giving millions of dollars to your wife, we are looking at your wife do these things on national television and spend this money, because we've all seen her lavish trips to Dubai, her glam squad, all of these things. So those are the allegations. So I would say like that's the high level, the shortest view of like what's happened in this case. If this is the first time you guys, which I know you guys are probably way more caught up than anybody else. So
We've got PhDs. I love it though.
yes.
No, it's good to get the background so that we really understand the gravity of what it is that Tom is being accused with, in contrast with the reputation that he had. Because, like you said, this is a person that was legendary in the legal world. Like lawyers were learning about him in law school. Just for him to end up like this, like, it's huge.
It's a huge fall. It's also not just, okay, was this person embezzling? Was his wife involved? It's also the implications of who covered for him all these years, because clients complained for the past 20 years, like, hey, this man is taking my money. Hey, this man owes me money. Hey, he settled this case for me and I have not seen a red cent from it. So that has been like a very interesting in terms of like legal ethics. Who were the attorneys that were in charge of like looking into his case and basically look the other way?
And so, in speaking of that, why don't we start over there? So, obviously, for Tom to have been able to get away with this kind of a Ponzi scheme, so to speak, for so long, does that mean that like there were people out there covering for him? And if there were, what does that mean? Is the legal world in California in for like a shakeup? Like, is there going to be a big investigation to see what happened here?
Yes, for sure. And they've started that already. So which is like a pain in the butt as an attorney, but the US doesn't go by federal in terms of bar association. So you get barred, so you get to be a licensed practicing attorney in each state. So he was barred in California, and I'm not sure if other states, for example, I'm barred in New York, I can practice in New York. And then if I want to practice in another state, I would have to waive into that state. So either you take the bar exam or you can ask for like you're a visiting attorney. So the state of California is under investigation basically for allowing him, when people made complaints, the bar association basically didn't look into any of these complaints, basically called these claimants disgruntled, said like, oh no, not Tom Girardi, who's like this wonderful person who Erin Brockovich is based on. And the old boys club is coming into question because for what it's worth, the legal field is very male dominated. I work in tech, it's very male dominated. So it's a lot of people who are now like, okay, well, these men were running around and people complained, why didn't you do anything about it? why I think the documentary, I think it was on Hulu, that I watched brought this up very well when the one victim who was a victim of a fire in his house and they sued the city that he lived in. And he was like, oh yeah, Tom said he was going to reinvest my money and I didn't see my money and I had to pay my doctor's appointments, pay all these things. The victim's parents also stated like, hey, we filed a complaint with the State Bar Association and the State Bar Association did nothing. So
No.
it's definitely not just Tom did all these things by himself. Like, that's not feasible.
Wow. And how long would an investigation of that magnitude take to wrap up?
Yeah, I think what's interesting now and what we're seeing and what the various attorneys are trying to poke at is basically Tom is now under conservatorship. He's claiming that he has Alzheimer's. They've gotten doctor's reports to say like, hey, Tom has Alzheimer's, like really can't look into this. And part of that, in my opinion, is skirting the Bar Association investigation to be like, well, how long has he had Alzheimer's? Like maybe it's not really all our fault, etc. Edelson, who is the original law firm that is filing on behalf of the claimants for the class action lawsuit for Lion Air, basically is very unabashed. And he tweets about this all the time, which I'm sure you've seen, saying like he doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe that Tom has Alzheimer's. He thinks the whole thing is a sham. And so we're going to see it play out with the bankruptcy court. That's most important. Like we have to get these people their money, but whether or not Tom at this point, he's not allowed to practice law. If you are, under that type of duress, like you can't practice law. But at this point, like who are the judges? Who are the people in place? I think they're going to slowly start looking into that. And the more that Edelson and their firm presses that, I think that will slowly come out. But I will say unfortunately, because lawyers in the legal field, and on my channel, we talk about this all the time, as much qualms as I have with it, lawyers are only as good as the public trust allows. So if you have bad apples, you need to weed them out. I think they need to look into all of those people as well.
Absolutely. So when it comes to Tom being accused of faking Alzheimer's in order to get out of the Bar Association investigation, so is that also okay? So I have to figure out how I want to ask this question. So do you know how we're talking about how there was a lot of like corruption within the legal system in order for all of his victims to be silenced all this time, called disgruntled? So is it possible that they're also going to investigate whether or not this man actually has Alzheimer's? Who was the doctor who diagnosed him with Alzheimer's? Especially on the heels of Ronald Richards. He had a PI on Tom Girardi, and the PI allegedly found that Tom Girardi does not actually live in that old people's home that he was pictured out of with a bruised eye. Like, are all of these things also in question?
Correct. These are in question. And I think I won't jump ahead, but to just mention it, because I know we're going to get there. I think that's one of the reasons why Edelson and his firm have subpoenaed Bravo TV, because they want to see the unaired footage of like, okay, you're saying that Erika and Tom are no longer speaking to each other, but Bravo would know that best because they follow Erika around 24/7. That's part of their contract. That's part of her job, which I think that's their angle to prove like not only in their opinion does he not have Alzheimer's, but also Erika knows, and she is also perpetrating a scam. I think that's kind of like their plan of action.
Wow. You know what? Thank you for mentioning that, because I thought that the reason why they were subpoenaing this footage was to itemize Erika's items, right? Because Erika's being very like tight-fisted. So that's what I thought it was about. I did not think this.
I think itemizing it, to be honest, like as a viewer, I'm sure everyone on here, we could itemize. You'd be like, okay, the Gucci belt costs this, the house costs this. Like it wouldn't take that long. I think the itemization is like one small factor, but it's more so to discredit what she's saying. Like, okay, I don't speak to him. I didn't know anything. Because at this point, they're basically Edelson and his firm are saying not only does Erika know, but she's also aiding and abetting what has not yet been deemed a crime, but is a crime. Defrauding people is a crime.
Absolutely.
Like right now, we're only dealing with civil court. Like there are no criminal charges yet. And I think the keyword here is yet.
Yet. And that is you hinting that there could be criminal charges coming for Erika and Tom.
I believe so. Wow. I think it will happen.
Oh, guys, this is juicy. This is juicy. If you haven't already, please make sure to like this video. Help us bump it up in the algorithm because this is juicy. So Faith has a question, which is, can they freeze Erika and Tom's assets?
Yes. And I believe from what I was reading, since it's been going on for so long, at one point they did, to which Erika complained that she had to move out of their home that they filmed in and move into what she categorized as like poverty in her $10,000 a month apartment, which
Yeah.
costs $10,000 a month. It's not poverty, but okay. But yes, they can freeze their assets. The way that would work is they would have to know where all of her assets are. And I think that's the big issue that the trustee is running into, because Eric
Mhm.
is basically saying, okay, like for example, the condo, like, oh, never seen that condo, never heard of that condo, don't know what that is, whatever. So to freeze something, you have to know where it is in order to like freeze the bank accounts.
So, my question to you when it comes to Erica playing cat and mouse with her assets and whatever it is that she has, what is the idea behind this? Is there a legal reason why Erica is not being very forthcoming about her assets, is not trying her best to make the victims whole as she claimed that she wanted to do in the reunion special? Like, what is her motivation behind, behaving that the way that she is? Because it's not very sympathetic to the victims or to the
Yeah.
public.
Yeah, I think, and this would just be an assumption, to be honest, in my guess, is most people that live in these types of lifestyles are not accustomed to going back to regular life. Like if you think $10,000 a month for a rental is poverty, you don't live in any type of reality, to be very honest,
True.
besides being on a reality TV show. So I would
Mhm.
say that's probably part of it. Also, the way that it was set up, which I have it, like I can pull it up on the screen, I'll find it. But the original complaint in the class action, you see Tom mentioned, you see Erika mentioned, and then you see about 6 to 10 other entities, including like her recording company, all these things. So her defense is, hey, I'm not privy to how Tom runs our finances. So by playing cat and mouse about the assets, she's simply going along with the idea of, okay, well, I didn't run the money. Tom gives me money because Tom is my husband and Tom loves me and I spend the money. Like that's the understanding of our relationship, which basically everyone's question is like, did Erika know? A
Yeah.
reasonable person would assume that you have to know something.
Yeah.
But she's getting pretty far with playing this game. But I think she's kind of met her match in like the plaintiff's attorney, because the plaintiff's attorney is having none of it.
Mhm. Well, you know what? And I really want to just mention this quickly. I think that Erica's own words that she's used on the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills will come back to haunt her on the show and
Mhm.
in the book. Because in the show and in the book, she talks about how Tom says that she is so smart because he talks to her about his cases and the
Mhm.
law so often that she can go ahead and write that bar exam and pass it right now. Right.
Mhm.
And she also talks about how Tom's money is her money because they do everything together and they file that
Mhm.
joint tax return. So I don't know that she can get away with playing dumb. I don't know.
I agree. I think the paperwork is not adding up to what she's saying, because she's
Mhm.
now basically trying to make statements, and like her attorneys are trying to pull up communications, and she's saying like, hey, I told the partners at his firm that he's unwell, that, oh yeah, like maybe he's just not all the way there, which the plaintiff's attorney that are suing them are like, well, we want to see exactly what you said. Like, who did you say that to? Where we want to
Yeah.
depose these people, and we want them to stand oath and say you said this to them, because they don't believe her. So I think it's only gotten this far, to be honest. We are almost a year into this. I think it's only gotten this far because people had no idea how much money it actually was. And
Mhm.
because basically every time Tom like admits, like, okay, yeah, I did these things, but also I'm broke. So what are we going to do about it if I don't have the money? Which if they didn't have
Exactly.
the money at all, that would be one thing. But I would guess that the money is somewhere a little bit. I don't think that they spent everything, to be honest.
No. Okay.
I would
Hold
doubt
that thought. I'm just going to ask one of Adriana's questions here. So,
it.
Adriana, she asked, how is this different from the Michael Avenatti case? He's now serving time for, I think, extortion of money from Nike. I think he's doing 2 years for this. What do you think about that?
Yes, so Michael Avenatti is actually like, his case is very interesting. Another fall from grace spectacularly as well. In his case is basically, the premise of it is you cannot a take your client's money and put it into any type of account other than an escrow account. Second, like extortion is taking it a step further. Extortion is, okay, I know something about you, or I have information about you, and now I'm going to tell you I know, and for me to be quiet, you need to give me money. You need to do this favor for me. You need to do this. So his case is a little different in that he has overtly done something. In Tom's case is a huge mishandling of client funds. It's okay, well, and to be honest, actually, I think that's actually a great question, because one of the victims, and it wasn't the Lion Air victim, it was the victim of the huge citywide fire in California, stated during the documentary that Tom told him, I believe he was very young at the time, like kind of like a teenager, Tom told him, hey, you're a victim, like you're super young, you're getting X amount of millions of dollars in the settlement. You have never had this much money. I, however, have had this much money. Let me invest this money for you. And that's what he told the victim he did with his millions of dollars. I'll invest the money, and every month I'll give you something, and this is for your protection. I think a shrewd prosecutor could then say like, hey, this leads to deception. Like maybe we can get an extortion claim. Extortion is actually a criminal charge. Extortion is I overtly did this. You would have to show like I overtly did something to you to extort money out of you. There's malice has to be involved. Tom is basically just feigning ignorance. Like, oh, you know what? I'm really bad with math. It's really my accountant. Like, okay, maybe I kind of stole some of it. Like, I don't know. So I would say like that's like the big differentiator in the two cases.
Wow, that's deep. That is dark. Jeez. This is so embarrassing, you guys, but I have not watched The Housewife on the House. They don't have Hulu here in EU, so I haven't been able to catch it yet, but I need to pirate it or something to get my hands on that. So now, you guys, just a reminder, I am here with Stephanie from Wine and Chill. She is a former entertainment lawyer, entertainment attorney turned tech attorney. So if you have any questions about the Erika Girardi and Tom Girardi legal case, please make sure to leave them in the comment section because we will be getting to as many as possible. So this document that I have over here is just the decree that announces that Erika Girardi and Tom Girardi's Pasadena home was recently sold. In fact, this was posted by Ronald Richards, attorney Ronald Richards, literally a couple of hours ago. So this is great. This is hot off the press. It sold for $1.2 million, 1.250. And so when we scroll back down to the bottom, it says the net proceeds are $1.152 million. So Stephanie, what exactly happens with this money at this point?
Yes. So at this point, basically, we are now in bankruptcy court. So, kind of to go through like the procedural history of the case started not in bankruptcy court, but in federal court in Illinois. And the case started in federal court with a class action lawsuit. And from there, Tom was like, oh, actually, you know what? I guess I should pay this money back, but oh, I'm broke. Then it went to bankruptcy court. So they went to bankruptcy court because Tom and his team decided to file for bankruptcy. And in doing so, people file for bankruptcy, rich people file for bankruptcy to shield assets. When you file for bankruptcy, it actually doesn't mean you're broke in terms of somebody of high wealth. And companies, corporations do this all the time. So in bankruptcy court then prioritizes who are your lenders, who are your creditors, and who are the debts you owe. They then prioritize in order of importance who is allowed to collect first. Unfortunately, the victims are not going to rank high in this order. So hypothetical example, because their list of lenders is quite long. Tom had loans that the law firm took out that they need to pay back. Tom had personal loans. He alleged Erika had loans. They owe many people money. The people who are the actual creditors will likely get paid out first. So for example, say they borrowed $10 million from Chase Bank. Chase Bank will basically fight with the other creditors and say like, hey, I'm first in line. I want some of this $1.2 million. So it's going to likely go to the creditors and to the people who have given them loans first. What the victims of Lion Air and that crash are doing, because there are multiple people suing the Girardis at this point, what they're doing is they are trying to win still in federal court. So they are trying to move out of bankruptcy and they're trying to go after Erika and saying like, okay, well, if Tom is filing bankruptcy, what does it have to do with Erika? You allege that y'all are fake divorced. Erika can go ahead and settle this lawsuit. So that's what they're trying to do, which is interesting. So they're trying to separate themselves because they would never win this battle of bankruptcy court.
So can you help clarify that for me and anybody else who might be a little confused? How do you get something out of bankruptcy court? So this money here, the 1.2 whatever net, they don't want this to go into bankruptcy court. They want this to go to Erika so that they could fight Erika for it?
So this is actually in bankruptcy court. So the trustee for bankruptcy court is going to apportion this to everyone that's involved. However, the victims, the class action victims, they don't want to have to deal with like the bureaucracy of bankruptcy court, because bankruptcy court will say, for example, Grace lent Tom $1 million. Grace is a representative of Chase Bank. Chase Bank is harmed in this. They should get paid out first. Stephanie is just, someone who's owed $200,000. Stephanie should have received money. However, Stephanie doesn't really rank high on our totem pole. So instead of waiting to the bottom, basically, all the assets can be done by the time you get to me. So instead of me doing that, the Edelson PC, the law firm that's representing the victims of lying heirs, said, okay, we don't even want to deal with bankruptcy court. We're not going to win against Grace Chase Bank. We want to deal with federal court. So we want to go into the federal court system. These are two separate court systems. We want to go into the federal court system, and we still want to win based off of the merits of our lawsuit. And the merits of the Edelson PC lawsuit claim and assert to this point that not only is the money there, that this whole bankruptcy is a sham, that Tom actually has money, they're also saying that the divorce is a sham. So they're trying to pull in Tom's money with Erika. So they're saying like, hey, this whole thing, you're trying to scam people, but I still want my judgment. I still want that to be won in federal court. Because once they win in federal court, then they can go to bankruptcy court and be higher on the list of people to get paid out.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you have a federal court. The word is escaping me right now. But then you basically have like adjudication from the federal court to say like, okay, you know what? Instead of being 10th in line, I am now more important than Chase Bank.
Oh
so that's what they're trying to do. So I think why this case is like very interesting and why it's so confusing. There are so many moving parts because this is a large scale sham. And a large scale scam that it's not just, oh, Tom allegedly defrauded one group of people. It's Tom allegedly defrauded many groups of people, and they don't all have the same representation. So some of them are getting represented by Ronald Richards. Some of them are getting represented by Edelson PC. Some of them are getting represented by other law firms. And while the firms are working together, it's not really in their best interest to all the way work together because they want to get the money owed to their client.
This is so sad. This is so sad. I was hopeful for a minute when I saw that number. I was like, yes, I'm so naive. I thought that they would divide it amongst the victims and this and that. I completely forgot.
He owes too much money.
Yeah.
He owes way too much money. He owes more money than what he's claiming to have.
Yeah.
Like this would be like if he had allegedly taken all this money and then stashed away $50 million in one bank account in Bank of America for whatever reason, then they would, seize the assets in Bank of America, split it out, everyone's fine. That's not what he did. He used a large portion of that money to pay for Erika's lifestyle. That money is gone. She spends however much money on glam every month. He used a large portion of it to own that Beverly Hills mansion, to own all these other things, which is interesting. I think an interesting point to point out is when we covered this on my channel, a few people asked, and they were like, how did he even make all this money? I've never seen an attorney. I know some very wealthy attorneys. I'm not one. I have student loans. But I know some very wealthy attorneys. I've never seen an attorney live in that type of fashion because a regular attorney could never afford it. A good attorney could never afford it. Like his lifestyle was very much obvious that something was amiss.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, someone asked, I believe that it was Zoe. Zoe asked a little bit earlier. She asked, so the IRS, is the IRS looking into the situation at this point? Because,
That's a good question.
The $25 million and the former manager and stuff, they all came out. It came out that her company made exactly $0, like in all the years that it was open, but it somehow got its hands on tens of millions of dollars to spend. Is this some kind of IRS situation as well?
Yeah, I think the IRS, so usually when people are perpetrating any type of fraud, they're not going to perpetrate this type of fraud and be like, okay, I didn't give my clients money, but of course I pay my taxes on time. No, they're likely perpetrating a fraud across all boards and across to make sure like, okay, well, I don't want to pay anybody. I mean, it's likely that they paid all their taxes, but it's also the same amount unlikely that they didn't pay their taxes. So I think they will be looking into Erika. I think with the IRS, it will be a little bit different because Erika's music career, from my understanding, from what I see, no shade, is a net loss. I don't think her music career actually made any money. So when you have a net loss as a corporation, you can write off that loss. So while the IRS should look into them, the IRS only looks at income. So if there's no income, then there's nothing really to look at.
But will they wonder where did those millions come from to put into this? Like
exactly. And that is going to be the more interesting question because you can gift a certain amount of money. It's low, like things like $75,000 a year. You can gift to somebody without having to pay a gift tax. But since they are husband and wife and they're married, his money is her money. So they wouldn't even have to qualify under that. But at some point, it is going to come up. This is $25 million we're talking about. Like, what did you possibly do with $25 million? And I see some people just simply saying that she spent $40,000 a month on glam, which is wild. So a good portion of this money is simply gone.
Yeah.
But not all of it.
So you keep hinting, and by the way, I forgot to say this earlier. Hi to friend of the channel, Campfire. It's so nice to have you here. We just did a live stream earlier today about the Real Housewives of Potomac on his channel. So if you're into that, definitely make sure to hit him up. So Stephanie, so what are they doing right now outside of subpoenaing Bravo for the unaired footage to prove that this divorce could be a sham? What are they looking into right now?
Yeah, I think when they're subpoenaing Bravo and all the unaired footage, I think to your point that they're looking at just to itemize everything to see how much money she has, because part of seizing her assets is quite literally assets. Like, okay, how much is that ring on your finger? How much is, that wig? Like, how much is this? Like, how much money is in your house? Like, we want some of that. I think part of it is to also show the malice section, to show that, hey, she's perpetrating a fraud. They're not actually divorced, to show these things, if that's the assumption, which from Edelson PC, that's 100% his assumption, that he doesn't believe anything she's saying. So they are it's his firm that has subpoenaed Bravo and claimed that Bravo was very helpful. So I think it's interesting because you have on one hand, Bravo's using this whole situation to boost ratings. Like, okay, yeah, like we filmed all of it. I have no idea why Erika would allow herself to be filmed, to be honest.
She has no money outside of Bravo. She has to.
It's very interesting. Like, I think her attorney, from like an objective standpoint, like should have told her not to do that. But I think Bravo is definitely going to be able to prove that, okay, we do know where some of the money is. We do know where more of the money is than the trustee is being told, because the trustee at one point also sued Erika, saying like, hey, you're just blocking our investigation. You are standing in the way. So the trustee is also trying to see like, okay, where are these assets, and basically trying to see if she's slipped up or said something to Bravo or anything of that nature.
Oof, this is going to be good. Okay, so we've got a super chat from Zoe. Thank you so much for the super chat, Zoe. She says, where in the list of people do you think Ronald and all the other attorneys are on the list of people to be paid out when they're doing distributions? Great question.
Yeah, this is a great question. So basically, attorneys, plaintiffs' attorneys, so these are plaintiff side attorneys. The plaintiffs are the people harmed and the corporations harmed. They only get paid out. There's a few ways to do fee structuring, but generally speaking, they only get paid out when their client is awarded money. So their client has to win the money, and then they take out like, okay, Grace is my client. Grace wins $1 million. I'm awful at math, so forgive me. This math is gonna be very wrong. Grace wins $1 million. I tell her my fee is 33%, so I take out, what's that, like $330,000 is automatically mine. Grace will never see that money because it's in my escrow account. It's in the law firm's escrow account, which is how Tom Girardi did all of this. His clients never saw the money. He put it in his account and then was like, okay, actually, the court told you $1 million. It was really 500 grand. So here's your portion. That's basically what they happened. So they're not, it's less of where are the lawyers in the list for distribution and more so where's their client on that list. So if Chase Bank is your client, for example, and just using Chase Bank, they are probably high on this list because Chase Bank is likely a creditor.
So, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but yes, Campire's right. She mentioned that her attorneys told her not to, but like Judge Justice says, like she can't. She's got no options at the end of the day. She's got to do this. But she is rumored to have some kind of a new sugar daddy who owns a couple of casinos in Vegas and stuff. Have you heard those stories?
I did. I was seeing that, which I think is interesting. I mean, not to like, I think there's like an interesting, she is not I would say backtrack for 1 second. She's like not a sympathetic person. She's not going to garner any empathy from anybody because she shouldn't. Like, it's ridiculous. However, I think her lifestyle choice is interesting because if you look way back when she met Tom, she was a waitress and she was maybe 30 or 40 years his junior. So I think looking at that type of relationship is interesting. I think it's interesting she's still like moving forward with these types of relationships. And clearly, I think that's why she has little empathy for the victims, because it seems from what I noticed, a very mindset of like, well, I worked hard to land this and do this, and like I don't know what you're doing, but I'm over here, which
Yeah.
is a mess.
It's disappointing.
It's yeah.
So, you know, Erika, like her story kind of does not really match up with a timeline of how all of this was unfolding. So on the show, she keeps claiming that she had no idea about him not giving his clients the money that they were owed.
Mhm.
You know, but like this stuff was very public as of 2016, 2017, starting
Mhm.
with a Lockheed lawsuit. And
Mhm.
so I'm kind of curious, are these the sorts of things that are going to come into question when they're asking her about, you know, are you talking to Tom? Is this like a crafted story that you guys have together? Because it's
Mhm.
not adding up, you know, like these
Correct.
things were very public early on. Like a lot of us Bravo viewers were starting to not really enjoy Beverly Hills anymore because they were fighting over dogs and like selling stories to Radar online. They were fighting over whether or not Denise had like, you know, intimate relations with Brandy Glanville. When all of this stuff was happening in the background, particularly the Tom Girardi stuff, is this
Mhm.
stuff that they're also waiting to, you know, get their hands on Erika to ask her about?
I think so, and I think they're gonna use the Bravo footage too to see if she's, like, said anything to somebody in passing, like, "Oh, yeah, by the way, that lawsuit," whatever, and I
Yeah,
think it's also important to, like, keep up the fact that this even in 2016, 2017, it came out in the public that Tom Girardi was being sued. He has been getting complaints for the California Bar Association for a decade, for many years before that.
yeah.
So, as his wife, would assume, my guess is that she at least knows something. You go to work, you tell like your significant other, "Oh, work was crap." "Oh yeah, like the bar association." Like if the bar association is calling you, it's not like some small thing. The bar association
No,
calls you, like it's a huge deal. Like this is your law license. This is how you make money.
yeah.
So her continuation of like, I know nothing, is not very believable. Particularly
I
they've
don't
been married
believe
for
it.
20 years. Like this is not like, oh, we've been married for a week. I don't really know this man.
It's crazy. You know, I used to date a lawyer for a couple of years, and I
Mhm.
had alerts for all of his cases. I would read them from start to
Mhm.
finish, and then he would go and sometimes do like sessions, like, you know, for like law students or whatever. And like he would
Mhm.
record them, and I would listen to these things from start to finish because I was so, you know what I mean? Like this is so
Mhm.
interesting to me. Why not? Like you want to be supportive. So I don't believe that she knows nothing. And like I said earlier, she already called herself out for that. Like a couple of
Yeah.
seasons back, she bragged about how Tom told her she could take the bar today and pass because
Mhm.
they talk about law so much together.
Exactly. Like, what are you talking about on the dinner table besides that? Like,
Mhm.
it would be a gross oversight.
Exactly. So now I want to get into the car accident. Tom
Mm.
had a car accident in 2017. Erika claims that this is the reason why he started mismanaging funds, even though it started decades ago. So,
Mhm.
what is the deal with that? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, to be honest, like, they're basically going backwards, trying to create a different narrative, is my
Mhm.
thoughts, is basically what we're seeing. Because we're going from, to your point, Erica saying on screen, like, "I'm so smart. We talk about the law all the time. Like, I could pass the bar exam. I can do all these things," to all of a sudden, "Oh, no, Tom is unwell. He's been unwell for a long time. He's doing all this." But then when you're watching the Bravo footage, he looks perfectly fine. He looks fine. He's talking. He's doing this. He's doing that. He's doing the next. So I think they're trying to create an alternate story, which I think is smart on the attorney's end to subpoena the Bravo footage and just be like, okay,
Mhm.
just give me the Bravo footage then. Because
Yes.
Bravo rolls all the time. So we're going to get to it.
Okay. And so now when it comes to the changing of the story, like why is it that she wants to paint everything as 3 years ago when it's
Mhm.
so clearly not that? What is it what happened 3 years ago that they're really trying to cover up at this point?
Yeah, to be honest, I think what it is the 2020 lawsuit is the big one that everyone's talking about, the Lion Air victims, because we're all very much like, oh, that this around what happened with that car airplane accident is very unfortunate. We're all very much aware of it. 3 years ago, nobody like unless you're watching Bravo, you're not super familiar at that point with Tom Girardi. Nobody
Yeah.
remembers like, oh, this is Tom Girardi from Aaron Brockovich. Like, unless you're in law school or unless you're watching Bravo, you're like, oh, whatever, Tom Girardi. So I think they're trying to just change the Nexus event away from Lion Air. Like Lion Air, in terms of when you're a lawyer, you have to look at, okay, what's the legality? Like, what are the actual laws? What's the practicality of this? Like, okay, the law is one thing, but like what people do in practice is not necessarily always aligned. And then third, like, what's the PR? The PR around Lion Air is just awful. It's just going to be awful. She will look
Mhm.
unsympathetic. She looks like the monster. She looks like this evil rich woman who like wears glam all day and does foolishness. Versus like, oh, 3 years ago, like maybe she just was a housewife. Like maybe
Yeah.
it's like semi-aspirational to some people. Like, okay, whatever. Versus Erika now, there's very few people I think that can find any relatable aspect of her.
Yeah. So that's the thing that like is stuck in my mind is why would she not go for the sympathetic role? You know, why would she
Mhm.
not be offering to sell off everything, to give back everything, to host a benefit concert? Because I feel like she would be able to bounce back if that was the route that she took. So I genuinely don't understand why it's this route. Like, is she trying to
Yeah.
save Tom? Like, is there still love there? Will they run away to a deserted island together to live their love story? Like, what is it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I feel like at this point, like all we have are guesses. I think that might be part of it, but I think also part of it is if she were to give everything back and do the benefit concert and be the sympathetic, decent person that people want her to be, where's the money in that? Like the root of this is I'm used to living like a billionaire. The way they live, no attorney lives like that. I'm used
Mhm.
to living this way and I want to continue living this way, and being the good person is not going to get me here.
Well, how much money is there? How much money do you think there is? And how are we going to find the money? I'm like Erica. I would like
Yeah.
to know where the money is.
I think, to be honest, at this point, the trustees have done a decent job. Because every week there's new legal documentation out. At one point, the trustees said that Erika wouldn't let them into the home. Like she just was like, "Nope, you can't come in the home. You can't like appraise anything. I'm not home actually. Like I'm getting Botox right now. Like leave me be. Can't do this right now." So I think that there is more money that she's alluding to, which is why she doesn't want to go the straight and narrow path of like, okay, I'll give it back.
Yeah.
Because if she didn't have anything, then she would just simply be like, I gave back everything I could. But
Yeah.
I think she stands to lose a lot of money.
Oh my. And now Anastasia wants to know why is she allowed to keep anything bought with his money? If a drug dealer's wife's assets would be taken, why not Erica?
I think it's a little bit more like who does society generally protect, to be honest, like not to go there, but society generally protects people like Erika.
That's a good
To
point.
be
Yeah.
honest, versus a drug dealer's wife is like, that's not a sympathetic victim at all. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you're ruining communities, you're doing all these things. We will RICO Act you, which is what the RICO Act is, and seize everything.
Mhm.
Versus, oh, well, maybe Erika is just planting the seed of doubt. Maybe I didn't know.
Mhm.
Anybody with sense thinks that she knows. But
Mhm.
if you plant the doubt, then you would feel a little bit bad if all of a sudden the tow truck came up to her house and just repoed everything.
Mhm. And now Faith wants to know the law firm partners, could they be charged? Because I know Ronald was recently tweeting about how none of them have ever offered, to give back any of the money or do anything like that.
Mhm.
Like, were they in on this in any capacity?
Yeah. Yeah, so in terms of that question, Faith, Edelson PC, that's the law firm representing the Lion Air crash victims, is actually going after the partners. So they are named in the lawsuit as well, and their firm is of the belief that all the partners knew. So if we were to get to like actual criminal charges, I think they would get charged too.
Mhm. So now on the topic of criminal charges, can you run us down the list of what you
Yeah.
think might be coming out of this situation? Everybody, the doctor who might have lied about him having Alzheimer's, if it's a lie, the judge, the
Mhm.
this, the that, who's involved and who can be facing criminal charges at the end of this
Yeah.
investigation.
I think in terms of criminal charges will be interesting. So currently, Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos, the Theranos startup, is on trial for fraud. And
Mhm,
she's basically facing 8 counts of wire fraud and then 2 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud to the tune of $700 million. So like this is a larger amount of money than Erika and Tom.
yeah.
So I think definitely Tom would have the same thing, wire fraud, and then
And what is
Erika.
wire fraud? Sorry.
Mhm. Yeah, wire fraud is when you're just taking money that you're not supposed to be taking, which is like a very blanketed term that they use, which is interesting. So I think Erika would then potentially get conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Whatever Tom is charged with, Erika will get the conspiracy to it. Most
Oh.
likely because the prosecution is going to argue, hey, to Cheryl's point, you're married for 20 years. Like, you two
Yeah.
conspired. You are a co conspirator.
Mhm.
Um, I think in terms of embezzlement, definitely at this point, like where did you get this money from? Obviously, have established, and Tom has admitted whether or not he has Alzheimer's. I don't know. I personally don't believe so. But Tom has admitted pre him saying he has Alzheimer's, like, okay, fine. Like, I didn't handle the money great. Is embezzlement. You have embezzled the money. So that I think would be a charge. I think there would be a few corruption charges in terms of the California State Bar, because why are there dozens of complaints against this man and not one was looked into? So somebody's losing their job if they go forward with this. And I think they will. I think the bankruptcy on Tom's brother, who is his conservator, is smart on their end, because it's kind of a smokescreen. It's kind of like, people in America are very interested in wealth. We're very interested in, oh, you had how much money? Like, how much does this cost? Like, what did you do with this? Your toilet is $15,000. And it's not getting to the root of the problem of, how did you do this for all these years? And what did you do with this money? So I think this is like very interesting.
And who investigates the California State Bar? And if they're laying charges, who lays the charges?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it would be the prosecutor's office, but if you're a prosecutor, you're also a member of your state bar. So I think it gets a little bit murky. The police, for example, they have a separate department called Internal Affairs. Attorneys, if you're going to get charged, it would be the State Bar Association looks into you. So they create a separate committee to look into the actual state bar. It's rarely ever done. So if it does happen, it would be such a huge shakeup and such a different way that the state bar associations have operated. And I think it is necessary, because at this point, you have lawyers who have large amounts of control when they have this type of money over many people. So I think it would be beneficial to restore trust in the legal profession, which trust in the legal profession is at an all-time low, to be honest, and for good reason, because people do foolishness.
And now, when it comes to Erika's situation versus maybe Jen Shah from the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, how do they compare in terms of jail time that they might be facing? I know the FBI is involved in Jen Shah's case, and she's purported to be the ringleader in her case. How do they compare at all, if at all?
Yeah, I would say Jen Shah, to be honest. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to look up. It depends on, like, is it state court, is it federal court? Like, which are these federal crimes they're committing versus state crimes? Depends on the years. But I think because Jen Shah's case is a large alleged scam of a lot of people, Jen will more likely face more years in prison than Erika. At this point, it's highly unlikely that any investigator or prosecution would be able to point and say Erika is the mastermind of all this. It's highly unlikely that she was. It's likely that Erika is a co-conspirator, that Erika knew and kind of turned a blind eye, or she knew and helped, but it's highly unlikely that Erika actually was like, oh yeah, I'm going to engineer this whole thing. It's highly unlikely. It's likely that Tom was doing this before he met Erika, used those funds to woo Erika, and then Erika likely was like, well, I too deserve a nice life. So, which is problematic and wrong. But I think Jen Shah is more likely to face years in prison if she gets convicted.
Oh, God. And now C wants to know, I was wondering what it meant when Crystal and Sutton asked lawyers about how they could be implicated in it. That doesn't make sense to me unless Erika has told them something that makes her guilty. That's a great question. Do you think that might have happened?
That's a great question. So basically, people are always afraid of, what you should be afraid of, being a co-conspirator. Like being like, oh, I conspired with you to do this. It's highly unlikely that Crystal and Sutton, like, how would they be implicated? Like, did you help Erika? Like, you go down to the bank with her to take out this money? Like, those are not things you do with your friends. Most people don't do with their friends, I don't think. So it's highly unlikely. And I think they probably just asked that to, like, be salacious and be like, haha, we're going to get, like, more screen time, just going to say this. But it more so makes sense with Erika and Tom. Like, that is a very clear co-conspirator relationship, if there is to be one. Told him she knows about his scams. Now they're withholding evidence if they don't speak up. So if this is true, that is a little bit different. So that would be like tampering with evidence is a much lesser charge than actually co-conspiring to commit a crime. Which it's highly unlike. Withholding evidence is such a smaller charge, which is why Erika's going around being like, you can't come to my house, you can't do these things. It doesn't hold the same weight of conspiring to commit wire fraud.
And now, I think you hinted at this a little bit earlier, but Cheryl wants to know, could Erika possibly do jail time?
It is possible. I don't think it's likely, but it is possible.
And now, if in regards to the possibility, from how many years to how many years, minimum, maximum, if she
Oh,
were
yeah.
to face?
So it would be depending on what she is charged with. So using Elizabeth Holmes, for example, Theranos, since that is like a clear case, she's facing, and she is the ringleader in this, facing 20 years for 10 counts. 20 years versus Erika, if she gets charged, might be 1 count, 5 counts,
Yeah.
maybe as a co-conspirator, like likely like 2 to 5 years, if anything. I don't think that she'd do jail time at that point. Like she'd probably take a plea, do community service. I think it's a little bit different than like Teresa Giudice, who actually served time, because it was very clear that her and Joe were in it together versus Erika set up there are a few different separations, which this alleged scam wouldn't happen without Tom going to work, being a lawyer, and then Tom purposely taking the money. So
Mhm.
I think it's like a little bit different. Like
And
Tom is a nexus event.
yeah. And now, how long could it take for criminal charges to be laid across the board
Yeah,
in this investigation? Because we're only at the tip of it, and it's been about a year, and we're
it's
still
been a
at the
year.
very beginning. Yeah.
Mhm. I don't think if there are gonna be criminal charges, I don't think we'd see them till 2023, and I think also because Tom, at that point, will have claimed to be, like, having dementia and Alzheimer's for all this time, he would not be able to be charged. You can't charge someone who's not competent to stand trial, so Tom will likely not get charged
Wow.
unless they can prove, like, "No, you're lying. This doctor, you also paid them X amount of
Yeah.
money to say these things," etcetera, but that would be very hard.
This is
The
so
conservatorship system is also, like, highly problematic and a mess as well.
This is so diabolical to do something like this, live that lavish off the backs of people who have suffered the loss of
Mhm.
parents, who have suffered the loss of spouses, burned through 90% of their body. And now you get to just go, oh, well, I've got Alzheimer's, I've got dementia, I've got whatever. And you skate on by while everybody around you pays
Everybody
for it.
around you perishes, which is why, like, it's greed, like, greed corrupts people.
Yeah.
Because how do you go from someone who, like, fought for people and did all these great things to
Mhm.
less than 2 decades later, now you have admitted, like, "Oh, yeah, I did take their money, like, my bad."
Mhm. Yeah. Oh my God. Zoe says, I think in a situation where Erica has shared information with them and they don't want to be called in as witness. Well, I think maybe in the case of Crystal, there was this one episode of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills where Erica was out with Crystal and Garcelle in the mountains when they went on that little staycation thing. And she confided in them about Tom continuing to call her. Is this what people are referring to? Maybe. Do you remember that episode, Stephanie?
I don't remember that. She told Crystal that Tom calls, okay, and lied to her friends in public. They don't communicate. Okay, it's turned to and like oh, that's a
Because
good point, Zoe. I think the worst that would happen to Crystal and Sutton and maybe Garcelle is to be called in as a witness, but it's, to be honest, much less dire than they're like being dramatic about. Like they would depose you. You don't actually like at this point, they're not going to actually go to a courthouse. Like we're in a panorama. So they would maybe get deposed. But I think to avoid all of that is why the plaintiff's counsel is just saying like, hey, Bravo, just give me the footage. Like I
Yeah.
just want to see it. Like I don't, what do I need to ask them for if I have video? Because
Hmm.
they might not want to be cooperative. Uh,
Hmm.
but if we were to get to a criminal trial, a prosecutor would definitely call them in and say, like, okay, we seen this video. Is this you? Is this Erika Jayne? What are you saying to her? And they would play it to confirm all of that. So
Hmm.
that would probably likely happen.
Okay. And now, as we kind of sign off here, I want to know from you directly, what is your overall theory about what happened here with Tom's little
Mhm.
Ponzi scheme and Erica's potential involvement or knowledge of it? Like, what is
Yeah.
your ultimate theory about all of this?
Honestly, I think that they both thought they wouldn't get away with it. There are a lot of people who do, unfortunately, commit fraud against the 99% of working class people, of people that actually go to work every day, and they get away with it. So I think
Mhm.
Tom, I think he got a little bit like big for his britches and was like, oh, I'm Tom Girardi. Like, I'm great. Like, they have a movie about me. I'm the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
And, whatever. And I think he found Erica's not his first wife. So I think he found someone he liked, and Erica liked attention. So I
Mhm.
think them being on Bravo exacerbated the situation. Because now it became, oh, not only are you perpetrating a fraud, you're rubbing it in people's face. which
Mhm.
I think that then is ultimately like kind of what gave them away. Because at this point, before 2020, before the class action lawsuit came out, 2017, to your point, Lockheed Martin sued them. He had a bunch of creditors sued him, say like, hey, you're late on your loan payments. Hey, you're not doing these things. So for many years, he's just been pushing everything off, like pushing everything off, pushing everything off. So I
Yeah.
think it was the culmination of all of their hubris, to be honest.
Uh-huh. And at what point do you think Erika knew about all this? Like how long? Years?
Yeah.
Months?
I would say if anybody that smart, that claims that they're that smart, because she's claimed like, hey, I'm smart, should have known within like 3 years. Like, there's no way an attorney is making that much money because it's not feasible. It's not possible for an attorney to make that much money and have an honest living. And I think a good example that people can latch onto and remember way back when the Kardashians first happened, which I'm like, don't watch that. But back when we were all curious as to like, what are these people doing? They all lived in that house in Calabasas, and they were multiple of them in that house that was like a decent size, but it wasn't a big mega mansion
No.
because their late father was an attorney. It made sense. They were wearing Juicy Couture. Like, they didn't look how they look now. It was no like 1% ultra rich. It was like, okay, it's giving upper middle class. It's giving like, okay, I can afford a couple nice vacation. It's not giving what it's giving today. And Robert Kardashian is a very famous, very wealthy attorney, but not $2,500 million wealthy.
Yeah. Not even with the right investments.
No,
It felt like
no.
devil's advocate.
Highly unless you invested in Uber from the beginning, highly
Yeah.
unlikely.
Oh God.
And I agree with Zoe, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just call a spade a spade. I think Erika and Tom both thought that he would die, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Wow. And I feel like that is a perfect note to leave on. This is it. This wraps up the entire story. Or maybe that might even be something that they're still waiting on. So if Tom dies before all of this is done being investigated, what happens?
They would still continue to look into Erika. Which is why I think in terms of like playing the long game and like not to be morbid, I think that's what some of these lawyers are trying to separate Erika and say like, okay, it's not just Tom, it's the both of them. So they still have a case if he were to pass. And say like, okay, well, my clients still need to be paid. I still need to be paid. And Miss Ma'am, it's you.
Mm-hmm. Smart, strategic. Good, because those people do need their money. And
They
Erika, she's got
do.
access to a lot of money. So
Exactly. Maybe her
yeah.
new boat can pay for it. We'll see.
Exactly. We'll see. You guys, thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much, Stephanie. You are just so brilliant. It's been amazing chatting about this with you today.
Thank you
Um,
for having me.
of course. So, all of you, please make sure to hit that link that I have in the description box below to subscribe to Stephanie's channel,
Thank
Wine
you.
and Chill. She cracks open a bottle of wine, has a couple glasses, and just discusses legal issues as it pertains to pop culture. And it is so good. You know what? As the reunion continues to play out, we'll see if more legal stuff pops up, and hopefully we'll be able to have Stephanie back on. And for anything else in the future of the entertainment legal world. I really enjoy your perspective.
Thank you, Grace. This was so much fun. And thank you everyone for having me.
Of course. Bye, guys. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.